The day we buried my grandfather, my mother was not in the front row. She was in Aruba, smiling over a cocktail in a photo she posted 14 minutes after his funeral began. I was Tamsin Vale, 36, a bookkeeper from Cedar Glen, Oregon, and I thought the worst thing my parents had done was abandon the man who raised me. Then, a text came from Grandpa's phone 5 days after he died, telling me to come to his house. Inside, his lawyer handed me a wooden box, a blue journal, and the first proof that my mother had not just skipped his funeral. She had used his power of attorney to drain $472,600 from him while he was dying. Chapter 1. The empty chair as I stood in the front row of Cedar Glen Community Church on May 11, 2025. With my hands folded so tightly, my knuckles looked almost white, and I watched 2 empty chairs pretend to be my parents. My grandfather, Eldon Mercer, was 82 years old when we buried him. To everyone else, he was a retired carpenter, the former owner of a small home repair shop in Cedar Glen, Oregon. The kind of man people called when a porch sagged, a fence leaned, or a widow could not afford a contractor. To me, he was the only person who had ever stayed. I was 36 years old that morning, old enough to know better than to wait for people who had spent my whole life leaving. But grief makes a fool out of memory. I had still saved those 2 seats in the first row. One for my mother, Marla Vale, 59, who had been Eldon's only daughter. One for my father, Graham Vale, 62, who had learned years ago how to disappear behind her choices and call it peace. On each chair, I had placed a folded funeral program. Cream paper, black ink, Eldon's name printed in a font Reverend Paul Ames said looked respectful. The programs sat there untouched while every other pew filled around them. Reverend Paul spoke gently from the pulpit. He talked about Eldon's hands, how they had built half the ramps and porch steps in Cedar Glen without ever asking what people could pay. Mrs. Delgado, his 70-year-old neighbor, hugged me so hard her church hat brushed my cheek. She whispered that after the big windstorm in 2018, Eldon rebuilt her back fence and refused every dollar she tried to press into his palm. He told me a fence was only useful if it helped somebody feel safe, she said. I nodded, because I could not trust my voice. Around me were people Eldon had helped, men with work boots polished for church, women holding tissues, old customers, neighbors, a few people I only recognized, because Grandpa had once mentioned fixing a stair, patching a roof, hanging a door. The church was full of people he had shown up for. And still, his daughter's chair was empty. I kept glancing at it like my eyes could shame Marla into appearing. I knew she had said flights from Florida were expensive. I knew she had said Dad would understand. She always called him Dad when she wanted the word to do the work she would not. But Eldon Mercer had never believed in love that arrived only as a sentence. He believed in bodies in rooms, hands on railings, soup left warm on a stove, a porch light burning until someone came home. He had believed that since late 1996, when my parents left me at his house on Maple Ridge Road. I was 8 years old then. I remember my mother standing near his kitchen table with her purse still on her shoulder, speaking in that clipped voice she used when she had already decided something and wanted everyone else to feel late to the conversation. I remember Graham waiting by the door, keys in his hand, not looking at me. They had brought 1 duffel bag, 2 grocery sacks of clothes, and a child they had grown tired of explaining. Eldon did not ask if I would be too much trouble. He did not say he was too old to raise another child. He did not call relatives to complain. He cleared the small back bedroom, bought me a moon-shaped nightlight from the hardware store, and sat beside me that first night in a chair that creaked every time he shifted his weight. Love is the person who stays in the chair, he told me. I did not understand it then. I only knew that when I woke at 2 in the morning, he was still there. That was Eldon. He stayed. He stayed in a tiny chair at parent-teacher conferences where other grandfathers would have looked embarrassed. He wrote notes on the backs of old receipts because wasting paper made him mutter under his breath. He left the porch light on every time I worked late at my bookkeeping office, even after I was married, even after I told him I did not need it anymore. He cried the first time he held my daughter, Lena, and then pretended he had dust in his eye from the workshop. He kept receipts in boxes by year, labeled in his careful carpenter's handwriting. Because he said a person who respected money respected the life it took to earn it. The man in the casket had been steady all his life. The people who should have sat closest to him had not managed one morning. After the service, I walked past the 2 empty chairs and touched one of the programs with my fingertips. Nolan stood behind me with Lena tucked against his side. My husband was 39, an electrician with rough hands and a soft voice. The kind of man who always wanted to fix whatever hurt me and hated when there was no tool for it. Outside, the sky was a flat Oregon gray. People drifted toward their cars, speaking in low voices. Lena slipped her hand into mine. "Why didn't Grandma come?" she asked. I looked down at her small face and realized I had no answer that would not make the world uglier. I told her I did not know. That was the first lie I told my daughter that day. I sat in my car for a few minutes after Nolan took Lena to buckle her into his truck. I needed one quiet moment before the cemetery, one breath where nobody asked me if I was all right. My phone buzzed in my lap. It was a notification from Marla. For one foolish second, I thought it might be an apology. Maybe a message saying she had watched the service online. Maybe a picture of an airport gate and some excuse I could pretend to believe. Instead, it was a photo. My mother stood on a beach in Aruba, wearing sunglasses and a white cover-up, one hand wrapped around a cocktail glass with a wedge of pineapple on the rim. Graham stood behind her, sunburned and smiling like a man who had never once failed anybody. Blue water shone behind them. Their faces were bright, relaxed, almost triumphant. The caption read, "Living our best life." The timestamp read 10:42 in the morning, 14 minutes after Reverend Paul had begun my grandfather's funeral. I stared at it until the words stopped looking like words. Marla had not forgotten. Graham had not missed a connection. They had known exactly where they were supposed to be, and they had chosen a beach. Not only chosen it, posted it. I did not scream. I did not throw the phone. I just sat there, one hand on the steering wheel, the other holding a screen that suddenly felt colder than glass should feel. Through the windshield, I could see the church doors. People were still coming out with funeral programs in their hands. My mother was smiling over a drink, while her father's name was still being folded into purses and coat pockets. Nolan tapped lightly on the passenger window. I wiped my face before I realized I was crying. At the cemetery, I barely heard the final prayer. I remember the sound of dirt hitting wood. I remember Lena leaning into my hip. I remember Nolan's hand on my shoulder. I remember thinking that Eldon had always deserved more than empty chairs and a beach caption. When it was over, people hugged me again. They said the things people say when death has already taken the only person who would have known what to do. I thanked them. I nodded. I held Lena's hand. I watched Mrs. Delgado place one small white flower on the grave and whisper something I could not hear. Then, as I was walking back toward my car, my phone buzzed again. I almost did not look. I thought it would be another comment under Marla's post. Some stranger telling her she looked beautiful. Some cousin clicking a heart because nobody checks timestamps when cruelty wears sunlight. But the name on the screen stopped me where I stood. Grandpa, for a moment, the whole cemetery seemed to tilt. Eldon had died 5 days earlier, on May 6, 2025. I had been there. Grace Holloway, his hospice nurse, had been on one side of the bed, and I had been on the other. I had held his hand while his breathing slowed. I had felt the last small pressure of his fingers before there was no pressure left. Dead men do not send text messages after their own funerals. My thumb shook as I opened it. "Sweetheart, come to the house. Bring your steady hands." That was all. No explanation. No signature. Just the name I had saved years ago and a sentence that sounded so much like him my knees nearly gave out. Nolan saw my face and came toward me, but I was already moving. I told him to take Lena home. He asked what was wrong. I said I did not know yet, which was the second true thing I had said all day. The drive to Maple Ridge Road took 20 minutes. I knew every bend before I reached it. The gravel lane still dipped near the mailbox. The maple trees still leaned over the driveway like old witnesses. I had walked that road from the school bus as a child. backpack heavy, stomach tight, always looking for the porch light. It was on. The small yellow bulb glowed beside the front door even though it was still afternoon. The sight of it hurt worse than the funeral, for years. That light had meant someone expected me. Someone noticed if I was late. Someone had stayed in the chair. The front door was not closed all the way. I stepped inside slowly. The house smelled like dust, old wood, lemon cleaner, and the faint medicinal sweetness that had lingered since hospice started coming. I moved toward the kitchen because every important thing in Eldon's life had happened at that kitchen table. A woman sat there with a leather folder in front of her, and Grandpa's phone placed carefully beside it. Harriet Sloane looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were sharp. She was 64, semi-retired, and had been Eldon's estate attorney for longer than I had known what an estate attorney was. She had also been his friend. They had argued about property lines, wills, and the proper way to make coffee for nearly 30 years. She stood when she saw me. "Tamsin," she said softly, "I'm sorry I had to do it this way." I stared at the phone on the table. "You sent it." She nodded. "Your grandfather left written instructions. Signed April 22nd. He said if anything happened to him, I was to use his phone and send that exact message after the funeral." I could barely breathe. Why his phone? Harriet's mouth tightened. Not quite a smile, and not quite grief. "Because he said you would come for that name." I pulled out a chair and sat before my legs embarrassed me. The kitchen looked almost the same. The chipped blue mug near the sink. The calendar still on May. The jar of pencils by the microwave. But everything felt arranged around an absence so large it had weight. Harriet opened her leather folder, removed a folded sheet, and slid it toward me. Eldon's signature sat at the bottom, shaky but unmistakable. His instruction was brief, practical, like everything he built contacts Tamsin after the funeral. "Use my phone. Give her the box marked with her initials. Do not give it to Marla." At my mother's name, something cold moved through me. Harriet bent down and lifted a wooden box from the chair beside her. It was old, darkened at the corners with a small brass latch. On the lid, carved by hand, were 2 letters, TV. I remembered it instantly. I was 12 when he made it for me. He said every girl needed a place to keep things nobody else got to touch. I had used it for cheap bracelets, school ribbons, and birthday cards I pretended not to care about. I thought I had lost it years ago. Harriet set it in front of me. "Your grandfather did not leave you money first, Tamsin," she said. "He left you proof." The word proof seemed to enter the room before I understood it. Outside, the porch light hummed faintly against the gray afternoon. Inside, I placed my hand on the lid of the box Eldon had hidden from his own daughter, and I understood only one thing. My grandfather had prepared something Marla never knew existed. Chapter 2. The box he hid. From his daughter, the latch gave a small, tired click, the kind of sound old things make when they have been waiting longer than they should. Inside the box, everything had been arranged with Eldon's exactness. Nothing was loose. Nothing was careless. A blue journal lay on top, its corners softened by use. Beneath it were photocopied bank statements, clipped by month. A folded document with a notary stamp sat in a clear sleeve. There were pharmacy receipts, a yellow sticky note with 4 account numbers written in Grandpa's slanted hand, a small USB drive, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. Across the front of the envelope, he had written, "For Tamsin, because numbers don't get tired." I pressed my fingers over the words and had to look away. Harriet sat across from me, quiet enough to let the room breathe. "He started worrying early last year," she said, "after the diagnosis." "October," I said. She nodded. "Pancreatic cancer. He told me before he told most people. He said he didn't want you scared before there was something to be scared of." That sounded like him. Eldon Mercer had once driven himself to urgent care with a broken wrist. Because I had a payroll deadline and he did not want to interrupt me, Harriet touched the edge of the clear sleeve. He was getting weaker fast, but his mind was clear, Tamsin. Do not let anyone tell you otherwise. I pulled the document from the sleeve and read the heading, Durable Power of Attorney. My eyes moved down the page until they stopped on the name of the agent, Marla Vale. For a second, I could not understand what I was seeing. It was not because I did not know what a power of attorney was. I knew exactly what it was. I kept books for 23 small businesses between Cedar Glen and Salem. I had reconciled accounts, corrected payroll mistakes, caught duplicate invoices, and found missing deposits down to the cent. If my grandfather had needed help managing bills, I should have been the first person he called. The date on the paper was March 18, 2024. I looked at Harriet. He signed this? He did. Why would he give her control of his finances? Harriet's face tightened. Because she came when he was too sick to argue, and because some part of him still wanted to believe his daughter had come home to help. I could see it before she finished explaining. March 17, 2024, Eldon had just come home from chemo. He had been vomiting all night. His hands had shaken so badly, he could not lift a spoon to his mouth without spilling broth on his shirt. Marla flew in from Destin, Florida, all concern and perfume, telling him she wanted to take weight off his shoulders. The next afternoon, she brought in a mobile notary named Linda Caro. The papers were already filled out. Marla told him she only needed authority to pay insurance, utilities, prescriptions, the kind of boring bills sick people should not have to think about. She told him you had Nolan and Lena and your work, Harriet said. She said he should not burden you. I laughed once, but there was no humor in it. He believed her? He wanted to. That hurt worse. Because I could forgive Grandpa for being weak. I could forgive him for being tired. I could even forgive him for being scared. But picturing him lying there, sick and hopeful, letting Marla stand over him with papers already printed, made something cold settle behind my ribs. I opened the blue journal. The first pages were ordinary, almost painfully so. Grace changed the dressing. Tamsin brought soup. Couldn't finish toast. Lena drew me a crooked bird. I smiled through the ache. Lena had gone through a phase where every animal she drew looked like a potato with wings. Then the handwriting changed. Not in shape, but in pressure. The pen dug harder into the page. Marla says I spent more than I remember. She says chemo makes me confused. She thinks sick means stupid. I can still count. I read that last line twice. Harriet watched me over her glasses. Grace Holloway may have records too. Hospice logs. Medication notes. Maybe nothing useful, maybe everything. Grace had been there when Eldon died. She was 52, calm, practical, with soft gray eyes that had seen too many families become strangers around a sickbed. She had also driven Grandpa to the pharmacy once, when Marla claimed he had spent too much money again. At the time, I thought it was just another small indignity of illness. An old man being corrected about his own memory. Now I wondered who had been correcting him, and why. I took the box home that evening. Nolan had already put Lena to bed. The kitchen light was low, and he had a mug of tea waiting for me like tea could hold back whatever was coming. He looked at the box in my arms. "What did Harriet give you?" I set it on the table. "Proof," I said, and my voice sounded like it belonged to someone older. He did not push. That was one of the things I loved about Nolan. He wanted to fix everything, but he knew when to bring tea first. I spread the bank statements across our dining table. April 2024 through May 2025. Month after month, paper after paper, numbers lined up in clean columns as if cleanliness could make theft less ugly. I opened my laptop and created a spreadsheet: pharmacy, hospice, utilities, insurance, house expenses, then another column: transfers to Florida. I started marking anything that did not belong: $700, $1,200, $3,400, a transfer for $9,800 in 1 month, with a memo that read care reimbursement. Another said family loan, another said house expenses, though the utilities had already been paid separately. Nolan stood behind me, arms folded. "Could some of it be legitimate?" "Some of it could," I said. "That's why we don't guess." I kept going. The first thing that made my stomach drop was not the amount. It was the address. Right after the power of attorney took effect, several statements stopped going to Maple Ridge Road. Mailing address changed to Destin, Florida. Email alerts moved to an account with Marla's name buried in it. Some statements went paperless altogether. That was how you make an old man feel confused. You do not steal the whole room at once. You move the windows. You move the doors. Then when he cannot find the light switch, you tell him he is losing his mind. I went back to the journal. April 12. 700 gone. I bought nothing but medicine. I checked the statement again. April 12. Transfer. $700. Destination account ending in the same 4 digits as the other Florida deposits. My hand went still on the mouse. Nolan leaned closer. Tamsin. I know. I called Marla the next morning because some foolish part of me still wanted to give her a chance to explain. She answered on the 4th ring. Wind in the background. Or maybe a patio fan. Well, she said, if this is about the funeral, I told you flights were impossible. It's about Grandpa's accounts. The wind sound disappeared. Maybe she stepped inside. Maybe she just stopped pretending. What accounts? The ones you moved statements from. The ones with transfers going to Florida. Her voice turned flat. This is family business. He was my family. Marla laughed softly, and it was worse than yelling. You were his charity case. Tamsin. He pitied you. I was his daughter. You were the child he got stuck raising. The words entered me exactly where she meant them to. For 1 second, I was 8 years old again, standing in Eldon's kitchen with a duffel bag and trying not to cry, because I thought crying would make me harder to keep. I looked at the blue journal on my table. You took money from him, I said. He gave you his time. Marla snapped. Do you have any idea what it was like being his daughter while he played hero for you? You got the bedtime stories. You got the porch light. You got the sweet old man act. I got the man who judged every choice I made. So this was payment? This was what he owed me. Then she hung up. I sat still for a long moment, phone in my hand, the call log bright on the screen. I did not delete it. I did not throw the phone. I took a screenshot, saved the call record, and made a folder on my laptop called Evidence. That was what I knew how to do. When people lied, I kept records. The next day, I went to Vale Bookkeeping Services because payroll did not pause for grief. Mr. Abel Whitcomb came in around noon with a folder tucked under his arm. He was 76, owned the hardware store on 3rd Street, and had the permanent squint of a man who had spent his life reading small print on invoices. My boy wants me to add him to the business account, he said, trying to sound casual. Says it'll be easier if something happens. I looked up too quickly. Abel shifted his weight. You all right, Tamsin? I thought of Eldon's signature on March 18. Marla's papers already filled out, the statements moving quietly to Florida. Don't sign anything because somebody says it's easier, I told him. His expression changed. I softened my voice. Just have your own lawyer look first. He nodded slowly, but after he left, I sat at my desk with my hands flat on the surface and understood something I had not wanted to understand. What happened to Eldon was not some strange family nightmare. It was a door many people tried to open when the old became tired and the greedy learned to sound helpful. That night, after Lena was asleep, I returned to the box. The USB drive was small, silver, almost weightless. I plugged it into my laptop while Nolan rinsed mugs at the sink. One file appeared, no title, just a date, April 29, 2025. I clicked it. For a few seconds, there was only static and breathing. Then my grandfather's voice came through, thin and broken, but still his. Tamsin, if I forget how to say it later, I didn't spend it. There was a pause, a faint sound, like his hand brushing the phone, then nothing. The recording ended before he could say more. Nolan turned from the sink. His face had changed. Until that moment, I think part of him had still hoped this was a misunderstanding, a bitter estate mess after a death, something ugly but explainable. But that voice was not about inheritance. It was an old man trying to leave a rope before the water closed over him. I opened a new spreadsheet and typed the title at the top, Eldon Mercer Accounting Review. Then I placed the blue journal on the left side of my laptop and the bank statements on the right. For the first time since the funeral, I stopped waiting for Marla to tell the truth. I let the numbers begin. Chapter 3. The numbers started talking by morning. The spreadsheet looked less like a file and more like a second death certificate. There were dates, amounts, transfer labels, account endings, and beside them, Grandpa's words from the blue journal. The numbers did not weep. They did not defend themselves. They simply sat there, patient and exact, waiting for somebody to stop calling them grief. People can lie with soft voices. They can change the subject. They can wrap greed in words like family, help, and what he would have wanted. But a bank statement does not flatter anyone. A receipt does not care who gave birth to whom. A date does not bend because someone cries. I was no longer looking at the papers as a granddaughter trying to understand my mother. I was looking at them as a bookkeeper chasing a missing account. The first place was Cedar Glen Hospice Care. Grace Holloway met me in a small conference room that smelled faintly of coffee and disinfectant. She was 52, with silver threaded through her brown hair, and the kind of tired eyes people get when they have spent years helping families through the parts nobody posts online. When she saw Eldon's journal in my hands, her face softened. "He was worried," she said before I asked anything. I swallowed. "About the cancer?" Grace looked down at the folder in front of her. "About that too, but not only that." She slid several copied pages across the table. Hospice logs, medication notes, visit summaries. The handwriting was hers, neat and clinical, but what it described was my grandfather shrinking day by day. April 8, 2025. Ate half slice of toast. Oriented to person, place, date, April 15, 2025. Transported by nurse to pharmacy. Prescription copay and supplies $43.18, April 16, 2025. Patient asked, "Did I spend $600 yesterday?" Patient appeared anxious but alert. I stared at that line until the room blurred. Grace touched the paper lightly. "He knew something was wrong, Tamsin. He was weak. He was not confused." I pulled out the pharmacy receipt from the box. $43.18. Same date. Then I opened the bank statement I had brought. April 15. Transfer $600 to an account in Florida. My grandfather's journal matched both. Grace took me to pharmacy. $43. Marla says I spent $600. I did not. For the first time, the pieces were not suspicions. They were a chain, a dying man's handwriting, a nurse's log, a receipt, a bank transfer, all saying the same thing. Eldon Mercer had not lost his mind. His money had gone somewhere without him. Grace looked at me carefully. "What are you going to do?" "I don't know yet." I said that was not entirely true. I knew I could not unknow it. Harriet had already given me the name of an elder law attorney in Salem, Patricia Ruiz. Her office was above a dental clinic. Not glamorous, not dramatic, just beige carpet, framed licenses, and a receptionist who asked if I wanted water. Patricia Ruiz was 48, compact, sharp-eyed, and direct, in a way I needed more than I wanted. She looked through the journal scans, the statements, the PUA, and Grace's logs without interrupting herself with sympathy. When she finally looked up, she asked one question. "Do you want the truth, or do you want peace?" I almost answered too quickly. Then I thought of Lena asking why Grandma had not come. I thought of Marla's beach caption. I thought of Grandpa saying he did not spend it, and having no breath left to explain. "I don't think peace is what they're offering," I said. Patricia nodded once. "A durable power of attorney does not make your mother the owner of his money. It makes her a fiduciary. She had a duty to use every dollar for his benefit. Care, bills, comfort, legitimate expenses. If she used it for herself, that is breach of fiduciary duty. Given his age, his illness, and the amounts I am seeing, this may also be financial exploitation of an elder." The words landed cleanly. Not revenge. Not family drama. A legal name for what had been done. Patricia gave me instructions with no softness around the edges. Do not confront Marla again. Do not delete messages. Do not touch the house if she changed locks. Do not send emotional texts. Send me everything. I already called her once. What did she say? I looked at the folder on my lap. She said I was his charity case. She said she was taking what he owed her. Patricia's expression did not change, but her pen stopped moving for half a second. Write that down exactly. Over the next several days, as records began to answer questions Marla had hoped would stay buried, Willamette Valley Bank had internal notes. Monica Bell, the assistant branch manager, had flagged one interaction because Marla kept answering for Eldon while he sat beside her exhausted. The note was short but sharp. Daughter answered for account holder. Account holder appeared fatigued. The mailing address had been changed to Destin, Florida. Paper statements had been turned off. Alerts went to an email address with Marla's name in it. Several online banking logins came from Florida while Grandpa was in Oregon, too sick to drive across town. Then came the notary log Linda Caro, mobile notary. March 18, 2024, 2:15 in the afternoon. Marla had scheduled the appointment and paid the fee. Eldon was listed as physically weak but verbally responsive. One note said Linda asked Marla twice to allow Eldon to answer for himself. I sat in my car outside Patricia's office and read that line 3 times. Marla had not needed to forge his name. She had done something colder. She had waited until her father was sick enough to welcome help, and proud enough not to admit he was afraid. A few days later, I drove past Maple Ridge Road because I could not stay away. There was a lockbox on the front door. In the yard stood a sign that said "Coming soon." Under it was the name Trevor Vale, a junior realtor and distant cousin on Graham's side, a man who had once eaten Thanksgiving pie in that kitchen, and now had his business card stabbed into my grandfather's lawn. The listing date was May 20, 2025. 9 days after the funeral, the porch light was off. That broke something in me more quietly than the Aruba post had. Eldon had left that light on for me for nearly 30 years, and Marla had managed to turn it off before the flowers on his grave had wilted. I took photos of the sign, the lockbox, the listing date. I sent them to Patricia. Her reply came back quickly. "Do not touch anything. Send me everything." Later that afternoon, Patricia forwarded me an email Trevor had produced after she requested communications about the listing. It had been sent to Marla and Graham. Graham's reply was one sentence: "Move fast before Tamsin starts asking estate questions." I read it once. Then again. My father had not just been standing behind Marla on a beach. He had known there was something to hide. That night, I opened the sticky note from Grandpa's box again. 4 account numbers, written in his careful, weakening hand. 3 matched accounts I had already tracked. Checking. Savings. Money market. The 4th did not. Harriet found it in the estate paperwork the next morning. A certificate of deposit opened in 1985. Grandpa had kept it nearly 40 years. It was the kind of money a carpenter built slowly, dollar by dollar, job by job, saying no to himself in small ways nobody noticed. On February 3, 2025, it had been cashed out early. I added it to the spreadsheet, but I did not understand the shape of it until all the accounts were sitting together. The certificate of deposit was the worst of it. $318,000, built slowly since 1985, cashed out early in February with a penalty of nearly $10,000, as if even the bank had charged him one last time for being betrayed. Then came the savings transfers, $109,400. Then checking, $28,700. Then credit card and travel reimbursements, $16,500. When the spreadsheet totaled itself, the number at the bottom was $472,600. I stared at it until it stopped being math and became a room I could not breathe in. Then I found the travel reimbursement, $16,500. Flights, resort charges, beach package, processed only days before the funeral. The dates matched Marla's Aruba trip. The one with the pineapple drink. The one with Graham smiling behind her. The one captioned "Living Our Best Life" while Eldon's name was being read inside a church. I closed the laptop very gently. Nolan was standing in the doorway. "How bad is it?" I looked at the blue journal, the bank statements, the photo from Aruba, and the total on the screen. They buried him with his own money in their luggage. Nolan did not answer. For once, he did not try to fix it. The phone calls started after that. Darren Mercer, Marla's younger brother, called first. He had the voice of a man pretending to be concerned while counting something in his head. "Your mother says you're turning grief into a lawsuit. I haven't filed anything. Don't be technical with me. This kind of thing destroys families." "No," I said. "Stealing from a dying man does that." He went quiet. Then he said the thing he had really called to say. "If lawyers get involved, there may not be anything left for anyone." There it was. Not Eldon, not truth, not what Marla had done. anyone. After Darren hung up, Elaine Mercer texted me, "Your mother is still your mother." I looked at the message and thought about 2 empty chairs in the front row of Cedar Glen Community Church. Marla had not been a daughter when Eldon needed one. That evening, Nolan found me at the dining table, surrounded by paper. He looked tired, worried, not angry, but afraid. "Maybe we should think about what this could do to Lena," he said. I knew he meant well. Nolan had seen families burn years and savings over courtrooms and inheritance. He was afraid our daughter would grow up hearing names like lawsuit and felony at the dinner table. "I am thinking about Lena," I said. He sat across from me. "Are you?" The question hurt because it was not cruel. I touched the journal. If I let them make him look confused, if I let them call this family business, then what do I teach her? That love means staying quiet when someone weak gets robbed? Nolan looked down. I did not ask him to agree. Not yet. My phone rang close to midnight. Patricia's name lit the screen. I answered in the kitchen, one hand on the counter. Her voice was calm, but there was no hesitation in it. "We're ready to file. But once we do, there's no quiet way back." I looked at Marla's Aruba photo on my laptop. 10:42 in the morning, 14 minutes after the funeral began. Beside it sat Eldon's journal and the total, $472,600. In that moment, I understood the truth I had been avoiding. If I chose silence now, I would become another empty chair. Chapter 4. No quiet way back. The next morning, I sat in Patricia Ruiz's office in Salem, with 3 stacks of paper on the table between us, and the kind of silence that makes a person aware of every breath. The first stack was a petition for formal accounting. The second was an Adult Protective Services report for suspected elder financial exploitation. The third was my affidavit. My name was typed at the top of it, Tamsin Vale, granddaughter of Eldon Mercer, bookkeeper, witness. Patricia did not dress it up. We filed today, June 3rd. Marla will have 30 days to account for every transfer she made under the power of attorney. If she cannot justify them, probate court can find breach of fiduciary duty. If the evidence supports it, the court can refer the matter to the district attorney. I looked at the pen beside the affidavit. It was ordinary, black plastic. Nothing about it looked heavy enough to change the rest of my life. Can this send my mother to prison? Patricia met my eyes. Yes, not because you hate her, because the records say she stole from a vulnerable elder. The words did not feel cruel. They felt clean. That made them harder. I stepped into the hallway before I signed. There was a window at the end, looking down over a parking lot where people moved through their mornings as if mothers did not steal from fathers, and daughters did not have to choose between blood and truth. I called Nolan. He answered on the second ring. "Are you okay?" "No," he was quiet. "I'm about to sign, Tamsin." "I know. I believe you," he said. "I do. But Lena is 8. I don't want her growing up with court dates and accusations and your mother's name attached to a felony." His fear was not betrayal. I could hear that. It was the fear of a father who wanted the walls of our house to stay standing. "This isn't an inheritance fight," I said. He was sick. She moved his mail. She moved his alerts. She made him think he was losing his mind. "I know. If I stop because everyone is tired, then she wins the same way she has always won. She waits until people would rather have quiet than the truth." Nolan breathed out slowly. "I'm scared for you. I'm scared too." When I went back in, Patricia did not ask if I was sure. She simply turned the affidavit toward me. I signed my name. 4 days later, Marla received notice. She did not call once. She called 6 times. I let everyone go to voicemail. On the 7th, she left a message. At first, her voice was sharp enough to cut paper. "You ungrateful little thing. He took you in because he felt sorry for you, and now you're trying to steal what belongs to his real family. You always knew how to play victim." Then the voice changed. It softened, turned almost sweet. "Sweetheart, don't do this. Lena still needs a grandmother." My hand went cold around the phone. Sweetheart was Eldon's word. Marla had never used it on me unless she wanted something. Hearing it in her mouth felt like watching her put on his coat. I did not delete the voicemail. I saved it, exported the file, typed a transcript, and sent both to Patricia. Her reply came 15 minutes later. "Good. Keep everything." Marla's next move came through the family. Darren Mercer called first. "What the hell are you doing?" "Good morning to you too. Don't get smart with me. Your mother is a wreck." I thought of Marla smiling in Aruba. She has an odd way of showing it. She says you're accusing her of stealing because you want the house. I'm accusing her because I have records. You're destroying this family. No, Darren. I'm documenting who already did. He hung up before I could say anything else. Elaine texted me that afternoon. This could have been handled privately. Then a cousin I had not seen in 2 years wrote, "You were lucky Grandpa raised you at all. Don't repay him by dragging his name into court." I stared at that one for a long time. They all said Eldon's name like I was the one staining it. Not Marla, not Graham, not the people smiling on a beach with his money. Me, because I had opened the box he hid. At work, I still processed payroll. I still answered client emails. I still corrected a vendor entry for a plumbing company in Salem and called the bakery on Pine Street about a duplicate invoice. Grief did not stop quarterly reports. Rage did not balance books. Mr. Abel Whitcomb came in on a Thursday with his old leather folder under his arm. He stood by my desk longer than usual. "My son brought those papers again," he said. "Says if I just add him to the account, he can help if I have a stroke." I looked up from the monitor. "Do you want him on the account?" Abel rubbed his thumb over the folder seam. "I want him to stop looking at me like I'm already gone." That sentence went through me quietly. "Don't sign anything today," I said. "Not because someone is rushing you. Let Patricia Ruiz look at it first." "Your lawyer?" "An elder law attorney." His face shifted. Pride, fear, embarrassment, all passing through. "Is that what you think this is? I think anyone who loves you can wait for a lawyer to read the paper." He nodded once and held the folder closer to his chest. After he left, I sat still at my desk. Eldon's story was not rare. That was the terrible part. It was only rare that he had managed to leave proof. Marla's formal accounting arrived just before the 30-day deadline. Patricia emailed me a copy with one line. "Brace yourself." I opened it at my dining table with Nolan beside me. Care reimbursement family loan, house expenses, caregiver compensation, no receipts, no written agreements, no notes from Eldon approving anything. The $318,000 certificate of deposit was listed as father's verbal gift. The $16,500 tied to Aruba was described as respite care travel after months of caregiving. I read that phrase twice. "She called the beach trip respite care," I said. Nolan looked at the papers, then at me. "She wasn't even at the funeral." "No, but apparently she needed rest from abandoning it." Patricia began building the response. Grace's hospice logs, the $43 pharmacy receipt, the Florida logins, Linda Caro's notary entry, Monica Bell's banknote, the email from Trevor and Graham about moving fast before I asked estate questions, Marla's voicemail, Eldon's unfinished audio file, piece by piece the lie lost oxygen. Then Nolan heard the second voicemail. Marla had called again, but this time she did not cry. She spoke like she was reading a statement she wanted me to fear. "People in Cedar Glen trust you with their books, don't they? I wonder what they'll think when they hear you worked the numbers on a dying old man, because that's what bookkeepers do." Nolan was standing in the kitchen when I played it. His face changed before the message ended. "She's going after your work." "Yes. I thought walking away would protect us," he said quietly. "I didn't realize she was already coming for you." Something in my chest loosened. Not enough to make anything easy. Enough to remind me I had not imagined the danger. He took my hand. "I'm with you. I won't speak for you, but I'll stand there." A few days later, Patricia found more on Graham. His name was on the credit card used for part of the Aruba charges. The reimbursement came from Eldon's account, and his email to Trevor made it clear he knew the house needed to be listed before I started asking questions. My father had spent most of my life hiding behind Marla's shadow. Now I saw the outline of him clearly. He had known enough to benefit, and planned enough to deny it later. The probate hearing was set for August 18, 2025, before Judge Everett Lasky. The night before, after Nolan left to pick up a part for an emergency electrical job, and Lena had fallen asleep, headlights swept across our front window. I knew before I looked. Marla stood on my porch under the light Nolan had installed when we bought the house. She wore a pale sweater, her hair smooth, her face arranged into something close to sorrow. I did not open the door. I turned on my phone recorder and stood on the other side. "Don't put your mother in front of a judge," she said. I stayed silent. Lena still needs a grandmother. My throat tightened, but I did not move. "Eldon gave you his time. Don't take what little he left me." There it was again, the arithmetic of resentment. I had received love, so she had earned money. She stepped closer to the door. "Take the house if that's what this is about. Just stop before you make this public." She did not confess. She was too careful for that. But every word told the truth anyway. She wanted privacy because privacy had always been where she did her best work. The next morning, I drove Lena to school under a sky still pale with dawn. She was quiet in the back seat, hugging her backpack to her chest. Then she looked at me in the rearview mirror. "Are we showing up for Grandpa now?" I gripped the wheel. "Yes," I said. "We are." At the courthouse in Salem, Nolan met me by the front steps. He did not ask if I was ready. He knew I was not. I carried Eldon's blue journal against my chest as we walked inside. For the first time since the funeral, I did not feel like I was entering the room alone. Chapter 5. The courtroom heard Grandpa. The courtroom was smaller than I expected, which made everything feel closer than it should have. Patricia Ruiz sat beside me with her files arranged in clean stacks. Nolan took the bench behind me, close enough that I could feel his presence without turning around. Harriet Sloane sat 2 rows back, with her hands folded over her purse. Grace Holloway was there too, quiet and pale in a navy cardigan. Monica Bell from Willamette Valley Bank sat near the aisle. Linda Caro, the mobile notary, kept checking the paper in her lap as if she wished ink could become something less permanent. Darren and Elaine were in the back row. They did not wave. They looked like people who had come to see whether there would be anything left to take. Then Marla walked in. She wore a cream suit and pearls, as if she believed clothing could testify. Graham came beside her, his shoulders tight, his face arranged into a calm he did not possess. Trevor Vale sat far from them, staring at the floor. Marla did not look at Eldon's blue journal on our table. She looked at me, not like a mother seeing her daughter in court, like a woman still waiting for the 8-year-old she abandoned to apologize for being inconvenient. Her attorney stood first and made it sound almost reasonable. A family misunderstanding, a grieving granddaughter overreading transfers, a devoted daughter trying to manage a sick father's care, a bookkeeper who knew how to make numbers look worse than they were. I kept my eyes on the journal. Patricia did not argue with adjectives. She answered with paper, but she did not bury the room under every document at once. First came the power of attorney dated March 18, 2024, enough to show how Marla got access. Then the bank records, enough to show how statements and alerts had been moved to Florida. Then Grace's hospice notes and the pharmacy receipt, enough to show Eldon had been weak, but not confused. Only after that did Patricia place the blue journal on the table. She let the room see it before she read from it. The worn corners, the shaky handwriting, the kind of notebook nobody writes for court unless they are running out of ways to be believed. But then Patricia placed one page of Eldon's journal beside one bank statement, and the room changed. She read his words aloud. April 15, Grace took me to pharmacy. $43, says I spent $600. I did not. Then she pointed to the statement. A $600 transfer to Florida on the same day. Judge Everett Lasky leaned forward. No one moved. For the first time since Eldon had gotten sick, his words were in a room where Marla could not talk over him. Grace testified that Eldon had been weak, not confused. He knew dates. He knew names. He knew when money did not match what he had spent. Monica Bell confirmed the changed mailing address, the paperless statements, and the Florida logins while Eldon was home in Oregon. Linda Caro confirmed Marla had scheduled the notary visit, paid for it, and answered for Eldon until Linda asked her to stop. Then Patricia turned to the travel records. Graham shifted before she even finished the question. Did you know the Aruba charges were reimbursed from Eldon Mercer's account? Graham swallowed. Marla handled the accounts. Patricia showed the credit card record with his name on it. Then the email to Trevor. Move fast before Tamsin starts asking estate questions. Graham's face went gray. I didn't move the money, he said. Marla handled the transfers. Marla turned toward him so quickly her pearls clicked against her collar. For the first time that day, she looked afraid. Not because the truth was coming out, but because the man who had smiled beside her on the beach had begun stepping away from the fire. During recess, Marla's attorney approached Patricia in the hallway. Marla came with him. Her face had softened into the version I remembered from childhood, the one that appeared only when she needed something. She said she would give up any claim to the house on Maple Ridge Road. She would return a portion of the money. She would stop fighting about Lena. All I had to do was withdraw my affidavit, sign a confidentiality agreement, and stop pushing for any criminal referral. Then she lowered her voice. Let me still be Lena's grandmother. Let me be your mother again. There it was. The sentence I had waited for most of my life, offered like a settlement term. Nolan's hand found mine. He did not squeeze hard. He did not speak for me. Through the courtroom window, I could see Eldon's blue journal on the table. No, I said just that. Back inside, Patricia asked if I wished to speak about what should happen if funds were recovered. I stood because sitting felt too much like hiding. I am not asking to keep his money, I said. I am not asking for his house for myself. If anything is recovered, I want it used for the Mercer Elder Support Fund, for rides to chemo, legal help, and caregiver visits for elderly people who do not have anyone sitting beside them. And if the estate allows it, I want the house on Maple Ridge Road turned into a small elder respite residence. Marla's attorney started to object, but Marla was faster. He owed me, she snapped. You got his time. I was his daughter. That money was mine. Her lawyer caught her sleeve, but it was too late. Judge Lasky looked at her for a long moment. The order did not come like thunder. It came in a steady voice. Marla had failed to justify the transfers. The court found breach of fiduciary duty. Restitution was ordered in the amount of $472,600, with damages under Oregon's elder exploitation statute. Proceeds from any attempted sale of the house were frozen. A lien could be placed on the condo in Destin. The matter would be referred to the district attorney. I did not smile. Winning did not feel like joy. It felt like the room had finally stopped calling my grandfather confused. The criminal case did not happen overnight. From September through December, Marla delayed, blamed me, and tried to turn relatives into witnesses for her hurt feelings. But the records did not get tired. Assistant District Attorney Rachel Kimball took the file. Graham cooperated to save himself. He admitted, Marla knew the Aruba money had come from Eldon and that they had pushed to list the house before I asked more questions. He received probation, paid back his portion, and lost whatever good name he thought he still had in Cedar Glen. I did not forgive him. I simply stopped waiting for him to become my father. In February 2026, Marla accepted a plea for felony financial exploitation of an elder, 18 months in custody, restitution over 5 years, a lien on her Florida property. No direct contact with me or Lena. Darren stopped calling when he realized the inheritance he had imagined was gone. Elaine sent a message saying she had not known it was that bad. I did not answer. Trevor lost the listing and faced a review because his emails showed he knew there was a problem with the estate. The first restitution payment was not large. It did not fix what had been done, but it started the Mercer Elder Support Fund. The first thing the fund paid for was 14 rides to chemo for a 79-year-old widower whose daughter lived 3 states away and never answered before noon. Eldon would have liked that, not because it was grand, because it was useful. The house on Maple Ridge Road was not sold to a developer. With Harriet's help and Patricia's, it became a small elder support residence. The workshop stayed mostly intact. We replaced the porch light with a new bulb. On the day before the house officially changed hands, Nolan and Lena came with me. Lena stood in the yard, looking up at the windows. Do you think Grandpa knows? I looked at the porch, the workshop, the chair by the front window. I don't know, I said, but I think if he saw somebody sitting beside an old man who had no one else, he would understand. I sat on the front step and opened the blue journal one last time. Love is the person who stays in the chair. This time, it did not sound like a wound. It sounded like work, like a promise, like an answer to every person who had ever used family business as a lock on the truth. When the evening settled over Maple Ridge Road, the porch light came on. For the first time in months, it was not only waiting for me, it was waiting for anyone who had ever been left outside and needed one person, just one, to stay in the chair. If this story made you think of someone who truly showed up for you, leave their name or their memory in the comments. And if you want more stories about women who stopped staying quiet and let the truth walk into the room, stay with this channel. Someone out there may need the next story to remember they are not walking alone.